We have a tendency in supply chain, as Justin mentioned early on, to do things the same way we've always done them, because healthcare is notoriously slow in changing direction. And that is just not the way that we want to do business. We expect our major vendor partners and strategic partners to come to the table with those wild ideas. The wilder, the better, really. And sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no, and sometimes it just gets a conversation going, right? And it's a journey to get there, but we're doing that same concept with other partners.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
Today, we are speaking with Sara Barker, Vice President of Corporate Support Services at MedXL Facilities Management. And we're going to be talking about strategic sourcing and supply chain's role within plant operations or the facilities service model. And Garry, this will be a first-time conversation for us. And I know you've worked with Sara, or at least you know her, and you brought her to the table. And I think you really brought a topic that's been uncovered in the Power Supply podcast realm. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with Sara today.
Absolutely, Justin. I think she's going to bring, like you said, a new level of that facilities piece into supply chain that our listeners are going to want to hear about. And it's been a year. My gosh, we finally got facilities in there. Her knowledge base of what she has, I think, is going to be really enlightening to the show. And I'm not going to ruin it for any of the listeners, but she's had some pretty innovative new pilot programs we're looking forward to hearing. So game on.
All right, we're going to be right back after a short break with Sara Barker, Vice President of Corporate Support Services at MedXL Facilities Management.
I'm Hays Waldrop.
This is Garry Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A production of 17 Studios. You're listening to Power Supply.
Joining us now is Sara Barker, Vice President of Corporate Support Services at MedXL Facilities Management. And we're going to be talking about an area that not a lot of people necessarily have a great deal of experience in when it comes to supply chain and strategic sourcing. And I'd say it's an area of growing opportunity. We're going to be talking about plant operations or facilities and construction. And I really want to talk about value-based purchasing in this area, Sara. So we're going to get to that. But first, I just want to welcome you to the show and really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your insights today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Hey, Sara, this is Hays. I wanted to ask one quick question. I just wanted to just jump in. Obviously, you're very, very busy. You've got all kinds of things going on. But what, outside of work, what keeps you busy?
I have two small children, 5 and 2. Two little boys, and I have no hobbies outside of momming. They take up all my time. When they go to bed, my team makes fun of me because they know the emails start rolling at 9 p.m. They're like, "Oh, the children are in bed.
Everybody's in bed." So, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's about it outside of work. It's a full-time job for sure.
Absolutely a full-time job. So all right, we'll let everybody else jump back in here. But I always like to ask something a little different like that. So good, thank you.
Well, and also, you happen to know Garry. So what I would like to hear as we continue a little bit with the icebreakers is, what's the craziest story that you could tell us about Garry that we could kind of like pull the curtain back and look behind at the Wizard of Oz?
And before this is not an explicit.
It is not fit for public consumption.
Okay.
I know what it is too. I know what it is. It's how we eat. It's how we eat steak in Idaho, right?
Pick up the bone. In a fancy steak restaurant. My husband was horrified. He was like, they were in Vegas at a, very nice steak restaurant. And he was like, I'm sorry, what are you doing? Dress him up, can't take him anywhere.
It's a T-bone and you're in Vegas, you're wearing boots. You go in, you take the bone. I can't get your knife in there. You got to work
with
it
his
out.
bare hands.
Yes, gnawing on the bone.
Like a tomahawk steak?
Yeah.
It was pretty close to a tomahawk. It was a good, 24-ounce porterhouse, good T-bone in there. Absolutely.
What you are, nothing else does right there. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah.
Gary's always a good time. Always a good time.
Oh my gosh, killing me.
All right, Sarah, now that we know what you don't do in your free time, and there's a little bit left to be desired on this story about Garry. I feel like we got real just surface level.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much.
I'd like to know just a little bit about your background. Like, how did you get involved in facilities management, and what's kind of your experience?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I have been with my organization now for about 7 years. I started my career in 2003 in logistics and transportation and kind of fell into supply chain. Just had good leaders who saw some potential in me, and it was never anything I set out to do, but I found very quickly that I loved supply chain because it touches every aspect of the business. And so it's a great place to learn about whatever business you're in. So I moved out of logistics and transportation into healthcare approximately 15 years ago, and then into facilities management about 7 years ago. So it is a space that I absolutely love because I learn something new every single day.
So we're going to talk a little bit about value-based purchasing like I kind of teed up there. But before we do that, I think everybody in the realm of facilities management, and especially on the construction side, has really looked at things as, kind of a low bid process, right? That's the way historically it's been. But we know there's been a big movement towards value-based purchasing in supply chain. And I made the mistake of presenting to an organization about 7 years ago. And I said, I know the construction area is really a low bid kind of sourcing process. And then they looked at me and said, oh no, that's not how we do things here. And that's when I started to realize that assumption was wrong. And so can you tell me some more about why that assumption is wrong and really the role of supply chain within that facility services model?
Yeah, absolutely. So you sound like the kind of partner I'd want to work with. MedExcel is the largest sole provider of...
Not really. No.
You'd be surprised. If it's not a little bit crazy, we're not interested. So MedExcel is the largest sole provider of healthcare facilities management in the U.S. And what makes us unique is our integrated service model. We have responsibility for real estate, planning, design, construction, and facilities operations, which incorporates things like regulatory compliance, safety, the environment of care, and emergency management. Having that full end-to-end spectrum means that we look at total cost of ownership and value-based purchasing very, very differently.
Sarah, really good point you're bringing up is the total cost of ownership. And so many different deals we get involved in on new construction versus renovations. What do those talks look like? And with the total cost of ownership, it changes the perspective that Justin brought up. That's not really how we address it. How are you working with your vendors and your true partners on really selling that true cost of ownership? Expand on that a little bit more, if you will, kind of go into that.
It's a lot of education. I feel like I repeat myself all day, every day, educating every vendor, even internally within the customers that we serve, helping them understand, and even some of our own leaders in construction or facilities operations, helping them understand that cutting cost corners during construction is going to cost us in the long run in that operational facilities maintenance cost and energy, which is a huge component of what we do every day. So while many organizations are looking at the lowest upfront cost, we're taking the longer term view and looking end-to-end relationship. Part of supply chain's purpose is to look at the cross-functional complexities of the relationship. It's not just the upfront cost of a part, a piece, a service. It's the total cost of the entire process end to end. So when we're looking for partners, we're looking at how do we decrease purchasing costs? How do we decrease the total supply chain cost? How do we help manage cash flow? So when we pay our vendors and how we pay our vendors is a component of that discussion. Really looking at, how do we transition a vendor from the planning, design, and construction space to operations? Many healthcare organizations, those are completely separate decisions and discussions. And you have a general contractor that puts in a product that a year from now is costing us an exorbitant amount to actually function and operationalize that component. So the integrated model means we have all those people at the table in the initial conversation, in the planning and design phase, and that operations voice is heard during planning, design, and construction. And that was a very big change or shift to make for the organization when we first started down that path 3 years ago.
I mean, just help me out here. It's particularly on like new construction. Are you seeing a lot of, the green initiatives on using building science for, better, safer, more efficient buildings? Is that something that y'all are a part of each and every time?
It is definitely something that MedXL is driving. We are driving that discussion. It is not something that our general contracting partners or other design partners, the large HVAC, building automation companies, they talk about it, but they don't really understand how to operationalize it. Again, going back to that total cost of ownership discussion, they want to charge you upfront for the latest and greatest. But what we've found is we'll pilot that and it doesn't really work, or it doesn't really do what we were expecting it to do. We are huge fans of piloting. We'll look at your new technology, but we're going to test it for a free or reduced cost. And then we're going to provide you feedback and we expect you to adjust. And if you can't, then we're going to find another partner.
And let me hop on that same thing right there. Do you have a product, a solution, or something that maybe you did pilot that really worked well? It didn't have to be a specific company, but an item.
Yes, we have a partner that we're actually working with for about 2 years, and we're very unhappy with the cost of replacement for our roof components. We liked their product very much, but we're also utilizing their service and found it to be incredibly expensive. And so we're kind of in a rock and a hard place of what to do next. And so we called them in for a meeting and really created a common problem. We like you, you like us, but this is not working. How do we make this work? And they brought us the innovation of restoration versus replacement. And that was wildly new to us in the facilities management space. Our roofing program manager, really, it took him a good couple of months to wrap his mind around that. But we have slowly moved our portfolio of roofs from roofs that are at the end of life that absolutely have to be replaced, that are, no longer energy efficient, driving up leak response calls. And when you rip and replace, all of that's ending up in the landfill, right? 44 dumpster worth on average for one of our hospitals. And so we started down the path of what would restoration look like. And it was truly a pilot. You're going to have to convince us that this is the path forward. And now we have shifted our portfolio to where the vast majority of our roofing work is in the restoration space. We are extending the life of roofs that are in that kind of yellow orange space before they hit red. And so we're extending the life of those assets with solutions that are 5, 10, 15, 20-year solutions. It's not one size fits all. It's not just one standard scope for every roof. We've created a very complex matrix to make the best decision for the organization. So that again goes back to total cost of ownership. Do we plan to own that building for another 20 years? Then we're going to put the platinum version. Do we plan to sell that space in the next 10 years? Then we're going to do the 5-year solution. But we're still not replacing. We're doing this restoration. And it has taken a lot of education, discussion to help people understand, that innovation is the right path forward.
That's a great example.
Sarah, is that the conversation coining the term disruptive innovation?
Disruptive
Please,
innovation.
that's what we're talking about, right?
I could talk about that partnership and what we've done all day long because it is phenomenal. That partner has really set the standard for all of our other partners in what we call disruptive innovation. It's taking what's not working for you, what's not working for me, and looking at it from a completely different perspective. We have a tendency in supply chain, as Justin mentioned early on, to do things the same way we've always done them because healthcare is notoriously slow in changing direction. And that is just not the way that we want to do business. We expect our major vendor partners and strategic partners to come to the table with those wild ideas. The wilder, the better, really. And sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no, and sometimes it just gets a conversation going, right? And it's a journey to get there, but we're doing that same concept with other partners.
Well, I'm going to transition this to value-based purchasing approaches because you really set it up for me nicely right there. But I also have a very big disruptor in the HVAC space that I'm going to tell you about on the side that I think you'd be very interested to hear about. So value-based purchasing, as we look at that in this space, what are some techniques for building in a value-based approach versus just lowest cost? Like, what are some best practices?
Yeah, a couple of things that we do is look at the go-to-market strategy, making sure that we have the right players, having the conversations. We're a very large matrix organization and we have a lot of experts, but if you're looking at any purchasing decision from one perspective, it's not a balanced decision, right? So we do a lot of stakeholder conversations, making sure that, especially in the construction space or equipment replacement space, that we have the energy folks at the table, we have the sustainability folks at the table. And that takes a lot of time, right? That sounds like it's not going to be very effective or efficient, but having everyone around the table making those decisions, right, for an HVAC system decision, we have the HVAC experts, energy, sustainability, purchasing, operations, the boiler plant operator might be there. And that sounds like a lot of effort, but in the end, we're coming up with the best solution for the building. That boiler plant operator or that HVAC technician, he's the guy who really knows what's wrong with the building, right? Why is HVAC not serving the building well? And so I think if you're willing to invest that time in understanding what is going wrong and what we need out of the system at the beginning, they're designing and engineering it to fit what the challenge is, instead of having a design and then we get on the site and they're installing it and we're like, the energy guy goes, no, that's not, we have a, this CHFM requirement in this building. And you're like, well, you missed the conversation, right? We're very deliberate and intentional about making sure that we invest that time.
Well, I was just going to say, it's interesting. You asked that question, like, why is the HVAC not able to keep up, right? And a lot of times that's because they continue to build out construction and they never gave any consideration to the system's ability to handle the new load. And so then you're like, well, wait a second, you've already built all this space. How do you expect us to increase capacity now that you've already put in footprint? And it's often an afterthought, which it can be, a huge struggle. I want to make an analogy with kind of like people come into supply chain, and a lot of times, especially in the sourcing area, they're doing either capital or they're doing purchase services. And purchase services is a huge opportunity for consulting right now. And it used to be the place that the newbie got stuck on, right? Nobody wanted to be a purchase services. So they stuck them over there and they're trying to manage all these service contracts. And I wonder, is there kind of a comparative analogy here to some extent on new construction versus renovation, where new construction is kind of like capital? Everything's capital. Hey, we've got this big project. Yeah, we want to manage the budget, but it's new. It's exciting. We're going to have this new build. And then renovation is sort of like purchase services, where you're going to get into the weeds. And this is where I tie it back to that HVAC piece. You're going to have all these surprises coming up on a renovation, and people kind of get stuck on that project because that's the more difficult one to manage. Is there something comparative there?
Yeah, we in the MedExcel world, MedExcel was actually created for the exact reason. The new construction is sexy, right? The doctors will always invest money in new construction. I want a new MRI. You're going to build me a new wing. I'm going to get a new Da Vinci. And facilities, renovations, repair, maintenance costs were forever getting shuffled to the side. And so the whole premise of MedExcel is that we bring data to those decisions. And so helping you plan for those things and understand why they are important, why it is important to consider your HVAC system, your existing system when you're adding to the building or doing new construction, or even planning for, your future strategy. We spend a lot of time working with the strategy teams to understand, okay, this is what it is today, but what do you plan for it to be in 5 and 10 years? We build the footprint for what you plan to be in 5 or 10 years. And some of that might change, but in our hospitals where we serve, we are very intimately involved in those strategy conversations because we have shown the proven value that, in the long run will save you money. We might be asking for a little bit more now in that renovation to prepare it for.
But it's responsible.
Yes, responsible purchasing, right? And to me, that is one of supply chain's main responsibilities, is to support the company in a constant and rapid state of change. That is happening in healthcare all day, every day now. COVID was a perfect example. The doctors and nurses did fantastic jobs, right? They were the ones taking care of the patients, but who were the ones making sure that you had enough ante rooms? Who were the ones converting those rooms into COVID safe spaces? It was the facilities guys. And they were doing it in some cases with baling wire and bubble gum and duct tape because that's what they had, right? Nobody really knew exactly what to do, but those men and women just went out there and got the specifications, figured out what needed to be done, and they did it, and they pulled off miracles. I cannot say enough good things about our facilities technicians in those spaces. But one of supply chain's key functions is to make sure that the business can be flexible. That in that constant evolution, that we're maintaining appropriate controls, right? Nobody panicked during COVID. We didn't move away from our controls, from our purchasing controls. We still vetted vendors. We still made sure we issued POs and did everything in the right manner. But we had created processes that allowed us to be flexible and to react to those changes and still continue to serve in a way that was meaningful to the business.
No, and Sarah, thank you. You brought up a really good point. I'm going to take you there. Current state of affairs with what we've had in the last couple of years. I'm hearing it a lot across the country and a lot of different discussion points of, inflation, the pandemic. We have surcharges coming your way. We have an increase of 5.9% coming your way. And it's just, if the contractual language hasn't been written thus, and you're just seeing those come down the pike left and right, how are you handling that now with this current state of affairs? And maybe share with our listeners of what are some best practices to work with our vendor communities and those true partners you're talking about.
I wish some of the cost increases they were showing me were 5.9%. That one I might swallow and just keep moving.
Yeah.
We're seeing vendors come to us with 15 and 20% increases, and you say, help me understand. We are always seeking to understand. The first question is, help me understand. Well, COVID. Help me understand more than just COVID. How did COVID impact your cost of doing business? We have a vendor who is our largest MRO supplier telling me there's going to be an increase on air filters as we move into our next market basket discussion. And so I said, obviously you guys are hedging your bets on a 12-month market basket. That's that's been our standard practice for 7 years that I've been here. I said, what would it look like if we did a 6-month market basket? Would you be open to that possibility? Because the cost of air filters in the last 3 months has actually started to go down. If you pay attention to some of that market analysis, and there's all kinds of, things you can subscribe to that will give you those insights. I have someone who helps me monitor that on my team. That's just part of their role, is to get those subscriptions and kind of feed us information. And then because we have some very trusted vendor partners, that partner was the one coming to me saying, hey, our air filter expenses are actually going down as a business in the last 3 months, but we're going to hedge our bets on a 12-month market basket. We're going to do a 6-month market basket, right? I'm going to hedge my bets and say that cost is probably going to continue to come down. I may be wrong at the end of 6 months, but I may be right? So I'm going to pay a little bit more for the next 6 months, but not as much as I would if I was asking them to commit to 12 months. So again, that goes back to considering doing business differently than you've done it before, right? Just because we've always done 12 months doesn't mean that's what we need to keep doing. And then really just asking them to parse out the why for you. I'm not just going to accept because COVID.
No,
right.
I think that's really good, Sarah, bringing up that point, and I'm hope we don't see those 20% increases. My gosh, that's scary. But what are some of the expectations that you have of your vendors? What are some key things you want to hear from them to build that true collaboration, that partnership? What are you asking for? What are you asking for?
The number one word we use with those truly strategic partners, and there's a handful of them, that word gets thrown around a lot. We have maybe 5 true strategic partners. Transparency is the first thing that we ask for. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has projects that go off the rails. Everyone is dealing with supply chain delays at the moment. So as much transparency and upfront communication as we can get is what we want. And we'll do the same thing. Sometimes capital funding falls through. Sometimes our projects are delayed through no fault of the vendors, but we always try. That transparency creates trust. And so when there's trust, it's kind of like family, like, oh, okay, that's, as long as I know about it, I can move forward from it and plan for it. So that's the primary one. And then the other one is, the willingness to be innovative. And it's not just MedExcel asking for crazy things. I want the vendors to come to us with their kind of crazy ideas too. We have a partner who came to us a couple weeks ago and said, we're considering an acquisition of a company and are very curious, is outside of our normal business space. We're very curious what MedExcel's thoughts would be on, the opportunity in this space. And so we've had 3 meetings with them, just calls to talk about, these are the questions I would ask, because it's a space where they don't play normally, but they trust us as a partner to understand that we know what we're talking about. So we're feeding them questions to see if it really is a good fit for them. And that's really cool. That's not like anything I've ever done in my, 19 years in the business.
All right, Sarah, this has been a phenomenal interview and definitely an area I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and they're just not going to know a lot. And I feel like it's the tip of the iceberg, but we really covered a lot of the key areas of the conversation. And so before we go, I just want to put you out there to kind of, since you're the expert, what would you add to this conversation that really people just can't miss before we wrap up?
I think for me as a supply chain leader, the thing that I try to educate those outside of supply chain, the people that we serve, whether it's the facilities operations team, planning, design, construction, HR, marketing, anyone who uses our service, is that supply chain is here to serve. We're here to facilitate the business and to make you better. We're also here to protect the business. So sometimes we do say no, but more often than not, we just want to enhance what you're doing. When you're challenged with a vendor, come find us. Come let us be the bad guy. I think that's one of the biggest things is supply chain is here to handle the issues, right? You need to keep a good relationship with your vendor, with your supplier, whatever service they're providing to you. So if you're having a problem, come find supply chain and let us be the bad guy. Let us help you facilitate that conversation, work through the challenge. And this is what we do every day. Have those conversations, again, about finding a common problem and driving us to solutions. And that may not be what they do every day. So let us help you. We're here to serve.
Well put.
Excellent, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you for having me. This was a good time.
All right, we were speaking with Sara Barker, Vice President of Corporate Support Services at MedExcel Facilities Management. And honestly, the conversations that we had today, Hays, made me think of a couple of other episodes that we recorded in the past. One with Arthur Kurland, who talked very much about total cost of ownership, but really in this ISO certified department managing personal property. But then at the very end, Sarah also talked about negotiating strategies. Let us be the bad guy for you. And we spoke with Rodney Erb and Beth Fisher Yoshida about successful negotiating strategies. And one of the things that came out was, how do we not have internal stakeholders negotiating directly with vendors at the same time supply chains trying to do their job, and some best practices around that. But we have never really tied all this together in the area of like plant operations or facilities and construction. That's a completely new conversation for us here on Power Supply. And I had a really good time talking to Sara today.
Sara was wonderful. One thing that she did kind of hammered home there is about let supply chain handle the issues. And, she just gave us some really good examples. She talked about green technology. She talked about, the process of how it's done and what a good relationship with a vendor looks like. So yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and I learned a lot.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode. But as a reminder, you can help support Power Supply by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts, as well as Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or you can search for Power Supply on your favorite podcast application. If you do download our smartphone app, you're going to be able to access certain bonus content for some of the episodes. And while you're there downloading the app, we'd appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback's important to us here at the show. And on behalf of Garry, Hays, and myself, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply.